You're 21, folding shirts at a mall kiosk for $10 an hour. And in 20 years, a man in Macau will refuse to play a hand unless you're already seated. Tonight, you're at a card table in somebody's basement in Akron, Ohio, lit by a shop light clamped to a ceiling pipe. 6 guys who all think they're better than they are. You buy in for $40 because that's what's left after rent. You've never played past a kitchen table game with cousins. You don't know what a continuation bet is. You just know how people look when they're lying, because you spent 4 years getting yelled at by a stepfather who lied for a living. And you learned to read a face the way other kids learn to ride a bike.
There's a guy at the table everyone defers to. Marcus. Local legend of the basement circuit, varsity jacket money. A laugh that lands a half second before anything's actually funny. He raises every pot he's in just to watch people fold. He does it to you twice in the first hour and calls you kiosk kid because somebody mentioned where you work. The table laughs. You don't. Third hour, you've got nothing. A busted draw, 2 unders, no business being in the hand. Marcus bets big, the way he's bet big all night to bully the table into giving up. You watch his hand, not his cards. His hand resting too still on his chips. A stillness that wasn't there an hour ago. You shove everything you have left into the middle. He thinks for a long time and folds a real hand to a kid with nothing because you read the one thing he couldn't fake. The table goes quiet in a way Marcus has never heard a table go quiet around him before.
You walk out at 3 a.m., up $280 and 1 chip. The host gives away a chipped $5 clay token, a house souvenir, to whoever wins the biggest pot of the night. Cigarette burn on one face. You put it in your pocket instead of cashing it. You don't know why yet. 3 weeks later, somebody slides a business card across that same basement table. It says nothing but a phone number and a room number at a casino downtown. Level 2. Grinder. You start playing 6 nights a week at a casino with carpet so loud it gives you a headache before the cards do. 1-2 no limit. The bottom of the food chain. Tables full of tourists drinking $14 beers and locals who've been sitting in the same seat since the Clinton administration. You're not good yet. You're disciplined, which is different. And at this level, disciplined beats good.
The man at the card room desk who slid you that business card is Delroy Okafor. Everyone calls him Books because he keeps a literal ledger, decades of hands written in a spiral notebook nobody's ever seen the inside of. He doesn't coach for free. He watches you for a week before he says a word. And then he says exactly one thing. You've got the read. You don't have the discipline to let the read mean something. He explains the difference between a good player and a good gambler and tells you that you are, right now, neither. You're a kid who got lucky once and is currently donating his luck back to the house 1 beer-soaked tourist at a time. You go broke twice in the first 2 months. Actually broke. Eating gas station hot dogs, sleeping in your car in the casino lot broke. Books doesn't bail you out. He makes you write down every hand you lost and why. The way he does, until the why stops being bad beat and starts being the truth. You call too wide when you're bored. You bluff too big when you're scared. You've never folded a pair of kings in your life, and that's going to cost you a house someday. You start touching the chipped chip before you sit down. 2 fingers in your pocket, a habit you don't examine. You're not superstitious. You're checking that the version of you who walked out of that basement up $280 is still in there somewhere. Marcus shows up at the same casino 8 months later, sponsored now. Some online poker site fronting his buy-ins, a logo on his hoodie, a tracked on-camera persona called The Mirage, because he likes people to think they're seeing things that aren't there. He sits down at your table once, recognizes you, and says loud enough for the table, "Kiosk kid made it to the kiddie pool too." You don't answer. You take $340 of his stack by midnight, playing exactly the patient, boring, correct game Books taught you, and he doesn't say another word to you all night. Books finds you after. You're ready for something that isn't a cash game, he says.
There's a tournament series starting Friday. It'll humble you in ways this room never could.
Level 3. Tournament Climber. Cash games and tournaments are not the same sport wearing the same clothes. In cash, you can sit and wait forever. In a tournament, the blinds climb whether you're ready or not, and eventually you are forced to act with nothing against everyone, with your whole life on the table and no way to reload.
Your first event is a $200 buy-in with 140 entrants. You bust in 2 hours doing exactly the thing books warned you about. Playing tournament chips like cash, protecting your stack instead of building it, folding your way into irrelevance. You finish 91st. Books doesn't comfort you. He shows you the math. You needed to be 3 times more aggressive in the first level than felt safe, because chips you don't use now are chips the blinds eat later. Fortune favors the guy who isn't afraid to look stupid in level 1, he says. You enter again, and again. You start final tabling small local series, $300, $500 buy-ins. Rooms full of the same 100 grinders trading the same money back and forth. You learn the parts nobody glamorizes. The 4-hour dinner break spent doing math on a napkin instead of eating. The ICM calculations that tell you a chip you're about to risk is worth less than a chip you already have. The bracelet-chasing veterans who can smell fear through a poker face the way a shark smells 1 drop of blood from a mile out.
You make your first real final table, a $1,500 event. 38 left, you're third in chips. Marcus is also there, 2 seats over, stacked the size of yours, hoodie logo bigger than ever. He's been streaming the whole thing, narrating his own brilliance to a camera clipped to his rail. When he busts you in a flip you didn't need to take, a coin flip all in he goaded you into with a string of insults timed perfectly to your tilt, he turns to the camera before you've even stood up. That's what happens when basement kids play with real players. You finish 14th. He finishes 2nd 4 hours later. And the clip of him needling you gets 40,000 views by morning. Captioned, "The Mirage breaks another one." You don't say anything online. You go back to Books' notebook and write down the truth. You let a man talk you into a decision instead of making one. That's the leak. Not your cards, your ears. Books slides his actual spiral notebook across the table to you for the first time. Not a copy, the real one. Time you started keeping your own, he says. Mine's almost full anyway. Level 4. Online Crusher. The travel is killing your bankroll faster than the variance is, so you move most of your volume online. 4 tables at once, then 8, then 16. A wall of cards and chip stacks blinking at you until 4 a.m. while a humidifier hums in a cheap apartment you barely sleeping. Online poker isn't poker the way the basement was poker. There's no face to read. There's only timing, bet sizing, and the patterns a person leaves behind without knowing they're leaving them. The half-second hesitation before a check. The snap call that means a hand was decided 3 streets ago. You discover you can read a screen the same way you read Marcus's hand at that first table. Not faces, patterns. You build a private spreadsheet, hand histories going back a year, noting which usernames bluff into scare cards and which ones never fold a pair. Books calls this the same gift wearing a new shirt. You were never reading faces, son, he says. You were reading fear. Fear leaves tracks no matter what it's wearing. You run hot for 4 months, 6 figures up, and start believing your own hype. Exactly the trap Books warned you about with the Kings. You bump up in stakes too fast, chasing a number instead of a process. And a brutal 6-week downswing erases half of it. You learn the real lesson of online grinding. Variance doesn't care how disciplined you've become. It will burn you down to the studs anyway, just to see if you rebuild the same way twice. You find Marcus's username buried in a dataset you're not supposed to have. A friend at a tracking site owes you a favor. The Mirage isn't beating the games the way his stream says he is. He's bleeding money in high-stakes cash to cover the buy-ins for the tournaments he streams, propped up by sponsor money that thinks it's funding a winner. You sit on that information the way Books taught you to sit on a strong hand. You don't post it. You don't need to. You just know it. And knowing it changes how scared of him you are.
which turns out to be the only currency that ever mattered between you two. A man messages you out of nowhere. A backer, the kind of person who stakes players for a cut of their winnings, offering to fund your entry into the one tournament series that actually means something. The series, the one with bracelets, the one Books has never won in 30 years of trying. A man messages you out of nowhere. A backer, the kind of person who stakes players for a cut of their winnings, offering to fund your entry into the one tournament series that actually means something. The series, the one with bracelets, the one Books has never won in 30 years of trying. Level 5. Live Pro. You fly to Las Vegas for the first time on someone else's money, which means every dollar you lose isn't only yours to lose. That changes the weight of every decision in a way no amount of theory prepares you for. Books comes with you, not as backer, as second, the way a cornerman comes to a fight. He's been trying to win a bracelet since before you were born and has 11 runner-up finishes to show for it. He doesn't talk about that. You find it in a magazine in the hotel gift shop, a "Where Are They Now" sidebar that calls him a cautionary tale. He sees you holding it and just says, "Put it down. It's not relevant to Tuesday." The series is the deep end nobody warns you about. 4-day events, 6-hour levels, fields of 2,000 players, where the guy across from you might be a plumber from Tulsa, or might be a player with 3 bracelets, who's decided to dress like a plumber from Tulsa specifically to make you underestimate him. You learn to stop trusting appearances entirely. The exact opposite of every instinct that got you here. The read isn't on the surface anymore. It's 3 layers under the surface, where players who know you're reading them are performing a read for you to find. Day 3 of a $5,000 event, you're at a feature table with a TV camera and a delay so the rail can't signal anybody. Across from you, Marcus. Fully sponsored now, a bigger logo, a worse player than the stream lets on, exactly as cracked as your private data said. He pushes a bluff at you on the river with a hand history that's been screaming weakness since the flop. You make the call that takes most of his stack. The cameras catch his face. It's the first time in 15 years you've seen him look the way you looked the night he flipped your mask. Except nobody's filming it for a highlight reel anymore. They're filming it for his sponsor to see. You don't make the final table. You bust 19th. A flush over flush. The kind of cooler that humbles you back into remembering this game owes you nothing. But you cash for the first time at this level. 6 figures. And Books, watching from the rail, doesn't say good job. He says, now you know what the room actually looks like. Most guys spend a whole career guessing. That night, your backer wants to talk about a bigger piece of a bigger stake. Books pulls you aside before you say yes. Staking deals are how this business eats its young, he says. Read the contract like it's a man across the table from you, because it is. Level 6, High Roller. You buy your own action now. The backing deal paid off, and you bought yourself out of it within a year, which Books says fewer than 1 in 20 backed players ever manage. You're playing $25,000 and $50,000 buy-in events, rooms with 100 entrants instead of 2,000, where every single person across the table has a story like yours, and a notebook like yours, and a chip on their shoulder shaped exactly like the one you've been carrying since a basement in Akron. Money like this changes the math of fear. Losing $50,000 in an afternoon stops being catastrophic and starts being Tuesday. And that shift is more dangerous than poverty ever was, because the discipline Books drilled into you was built by scarcity. And scarcity is the one teacher this level no longer employs. You watch good players come apart at this level, not because they get worse, but because losing stops hurting enough to keep them honest. Marcus shows up in these rooms too, his sponsor having doubled down rather than cut him loose, the way bad bets sometimes get bigger instead of smaller. He started playing recklessly in a way that used to be his strength and has curdled into a tell of its own. A man performing fearlessness because actual fearlessness left the building a long time ago. You watch him torch 2 buy-ins in 1 week, chasing a stream moment instead of a decision, and you understand, with no satisfaction in it at all, that you're watching a man's career end in real time. And he's the only one in the room who doesn't know it yet.
You start keeping the chipped chip on the rail instead of in your pocket. Visible now. A small object next to a 6-figure stack that makes no sense to anyone who doesn't know the story. A young player 2 seats down asks about it during a break. You tell him the short version. He laughs, says that's a true story, and asks if he can touch it for luck before a big hand. You let him. He wins the pot. You don't tell him luck has nothing to do with it. Some things you let people believe because the belief does more work than the truth would. Books calls you with news that isn't poker news. He's sick. The kind of sick that ends a 30-year career on a clock nobody can negotiate with. He asks you to do one thing for him before he can't ask any more. Win the bracelet he never could. In the one event he's wanted his whole life. The $1,500 he always swore was unlucky for him and only him.
Level 7. The Bracelet Run. You enter the event Books has chased for 3 decades. Not because the buy-in is anything to you anymore, but because the debt is everything. 6 days, 2,000 entrants, a field that includes Marcus, 3 former world champions, and a 19-year-old kid who reminds you so much of yourself at the felt table in Akron that it's almost funny. Except it isn't, because you can already see which of his tells will get him hurt in 5 years, if nobody tells him. Books is too sick to be on the rail in person. He watches from a hospital bed 2 states away, on a live stream his daughter sets up. The spiral notebook on his lap even now, still writing hands he isn't even playing. Because some habits aren't habits anymore. They're who a person is. You play 4 days of the cleanest poker of your life. Patient when patience pays, and savage when savagery is owed. The entire game he ever taught you compressed into 96 hours that matter more than any of the 100,000 hours before them. Day 5. Heads up for the final table seat. You and Marcus, the 2 basement kids from Akron. 20 years and 1,000 tables later. Both of you knowing exactly what the other one's stillness means, and exactly what the other one's motion means. The read finally canceling itself out into something almost like respect. He shoves a marginal hand at you, a move that used to work on you when you were 21, and has never worked on you since the day Books showed you the difference between fear and decision. You call. He's drawing nearly dead. The board runs out clean. He's out. He doesn't insult you on the way to the rail. He just nods. Once. The first honest thing he's done in front of you since a shop light in a basement 20 years ago. You make the final table. You're 3rd in chips. The bracelet, the actual object, gold and ugly and exactly as heavy as everyone says, sits on a stand under a spotlight where you can see it from your seat for the entire final day. With 4 players left, your phone buzzes once, face down on the rail. You don't look at it. You already know, the way you've always known things before anyone says them out loud. Level 8. Champion. You win the bracelet at 4 in the morning. Heads up against the 19-year-old who reminds you of yourself. A kid you find yourself rooting against and for in the exact same breath. The hand that ends it isn't dramatic. A value bet he calls with a hand too weak to call. The kind of mistake every young player makes before they learn what you learned. From a man in a hospital bed 2 states away, you shake his hand. You tell him to find someone who'll tell him the truth about his leaks, before the truth gets expensive. He doesn't know yet that you just did him the single biggest favor of his career. You pick up the bracelet. It's heavier than it looks in photographs. The way most things that take 30 years to earn are heavier than they look. You don't call your backer first, or your sponsor, or anyone with a logo. You call the hospital. Books' daughter picks up and holds the phone to his ear. He doesn't say congratulations. He says, read me the final hand. And you do. Every card, every bet size, every tell. The way he taught you to read hands back to him in a notebook 1,000 nights ago. And on the other end of the line,
You can hear him smiling, even though you can't see it. He doesn't make it to the next event. He goes quietly. 3 weeks later, the notebook's still on the nightstand. Decades of hands in handwriting that gets shakier toward the end and never once gets less precise. You inherit the notebook. You don't know what to do with 30 years of somebody else's losses yet. You just know you're not ready to read it all in one sitting.
Marcus finds you at the memorial. Books backed half the room at some point in 30 years. And grief turns out to be the one table where everyone's holding the same hand. He's lost his sponsor by now, the streaming numbers having finally caught up with the losing numbers underneath them. And he looks smaller than you've ever seen him. A man who spent 20 years performing fearlessness, finally just standing in a room being afraid like everybody else. He doesn't ask you for anything. He just says quietly, "He taught me too, before you. I just didn't listen." You believe him. It explains a few things you never had a name for. You take the chipped chip out of your pocket that night for the first time in months. It's gone soft and dull. The burn mark almost worn away from 20 years of being carried. You set it on top of the notebook on your nightstand and don't pick either of them up again for a long time. Level 9. The game behind the game. You stop chasing buy-ins 3 years after the bracelet. Not because you've gone broke, and not because you've gone cold, but because you noticed one night that you were reading a table out of habit instead of hunger. And habit was never what books meant when he said discipline. You still play. Small games now. Low stakes. Mostly for the company. But you spend most of your hours doing something you swore at 21 you'd never do. Teaching. You run a small academy out of a back room that used to be a pawn shop. 6 tables, a whiteboard, and a strict rule that nobody who can't afford to lose the buy-in is allowed to sit down. Half your students are kids who remind you of yourself. A few remind you of Marcus, which you've learned to watch for now, because the talent and the wound usually arrive in the same body, and only one of them is fixable from the outside. Marcus calls you, the first time he's ever called rather than waited to be found. He's coaching too now, a small operation in another city, and he wants to know if you'd consider running a joint series. 2 old rivals, 1 stage, the story practically writes its own marketing. You say yes, not for the money, for the closing of something that's been open since a shop light and a flipped mask and a card table in a basement neither of you can stop thinking about all these years later. You finally open the spiral notebook all the way through. Every page, every hand books ever recorded, across 30 years and 11 runner-ups. And somewhere past the middle, you find an entry in different handwriting. Yours, from years before you knew he'd kept it. A hand you played in a $1,500 event he must have copied down from the rail without telling you. Underneath it, in his writing, 1 line. Kid's got the read, just needs the patience. Give him time. You'd given him time. He'd given you everything. You take a new kid to the felt for the first time the following week. 19, broke, working a kiosk job he hates, with a read on people that scares him a little because he doesn't have a word for it yet. You don't tell him the whole story. You just hand him a chipped clay chip across the table, the burn mark almost gone now, the object lighter in your hand than it's ever felt. And you tell him the only thing that ever actually mattered. The cards don't lie. People do. Spend your whole life learning the difference, and you'll never go hungry again. He turns the chip over in his fingers, the way you once did, 20 years and a lifetime ago, and you watch him decide, right there, what he's going to be. If you like this story, like and subscribe for more.